Something extraordinary has come to light. A long-lost letter written by a Roman official named Aurelius Lentulus, a contemporary of Jesus Christ, describes Jesus in vivid and stunning detail. Lentulus witnessed Jesus' life and wrote frequent letters to Caesar in Rome, as he was required to report significant events back to the emperor. This remarkable description of Jesus offers a rare glimpse into what he may have looked like, and it challenges many of our modern conceptions. Stick around until the end of this narrative, because what I share will change the way you see the life and legacy of Jesus. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to stay connected as we aim to make God the biggest channel in the world, and you'll be able to say you were here before we reached 100K. For centuries, artists, theologians, and believers have speculated about what Jesus of Nazareth, the central figure of Christianity, might have looked like. Many of the images we've come to associate with Jesus, depictions in paintings, sculptures, and religious icons, often reflect the societies and artistic styles of the time. This has led to countless portrayals of Jesus as a European, often with light skin, blue eyes, and light brown or golden hair. One of the most reproduced images of Jesus comes from a much more recent time, specifically the 1940s. The famous painting titled Head of Christ, created by the former commercial artist Warner Sallman, has been one of the most widely circulated images of Christ in modern history. Sallman's rendition shows Jesus with gentle, European features, a beard, and long flowing hair. This image, produced during a time when Christianity was heavily influenced by Western culture, has shaped the way many people around the world imagine Jesus. Sallman's painting became iconic after he collaborated with two Christian publishing companies, one Protestant and one Catholic, to distribute it in various forms, including prayer cards, stained glass, oil paintings, calendars, hymnals, and even nightlights. It's interesting to note that Sallman's Jesus became such a standard that many churches, schools, and homes adopted it as their primary image of Christ. The popularity of this painting continues even today, further reinforcing the westernized image of Jesus. But where does this image of a white, European-looking Jesus come from? It's part of a long tradition of European artists painting Christ in ways that reflected themselves or their surroundings. European depictions of Christ began to dominate art and popular culture, especially during and after the Renaissance. These images were deeply influenced by the social and cultural contexts of the time, rather than historical accuracy or geographical realism. However, historical and anthropological studies suggest a very different appearance for Jesus. Jesus was born in the region of Galilee, in what is now Israel/Palestine, during the 1st century, a time and place where people generally had darker skin, brown eyes, and dark hair. As a Jew from the ancient Middle East, Jesus would likely have shared these characteristics. Despite these logical assumptions, no one knows exactly what Jesus looked like, as there are no contemporary images or physical descriptions from his lifetime. While the Bible offers some descriptions of people in the Old Testament, such as the appearance of King Saul and King David, who were both described as tall and handsome, the New Testament gives very little detail about Jesus' physical appearance. This absence has allowed for artistic imagination and cultural influences to fill in the gaps. The Old Testament prophet Isaiah makes a cryptic reference to the coming Savior's appearance, stating that he had no special beauty or majesty to attract us to him. On the other hand, the Book of Psalms describes him as more beautiful than any man. These contrasting descriptions leave much to interpretation and have fueled centuries of debate over what Jesus might have looked like. One of the most fascinating pieces of evidence that adds to this mystery is a well-known letter, attributed to the Roman official Aurelius Lentulus, who reportedly wrote a detailed account of Jesus to Emperor Tiberius. The letter describes Jesus as having a noble and lively face, with fair and slightly wavy hair, dark, curved eyebrows, deep blue eyes, and a graceful expression. His nose was long, his beard light-colored, and his skin tanned. His demeanor was described as calm, wise, and kind, without any signs of anger or arrogance. This detailed description provides a striking contrast to the idea of a more Middle Eastern-looking Jesus, and instead aligns more with the European artistic traditions that have dominated Christian art. However, the authenticity of Lentulus' letter has been the subject of much debate. Some scholars argue that the letter may not be genuine and that it could have been written much later than the 1st century. Others point out that the letter's description of Jesus closely follows traditional artistic portrayals of Christ, raising questions about whether the letter was influenced by later depictions rather than eyewitness testimony. In addition to the letter attributed to Lentulus, there are other historical writings that provide insights into Jesus' appearance and the way he was perceived by his contemporaries. One such source is a letter from Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea during the time of Jesus' ministry. Pilate, who famously presided over Jesus' trial and ultimately authorized his crucifixion, is said to have written letters to the Roman authorities describing his encounters with Jesus. While the content of these letters remains largely speculative, they offer a glimpse into how Jesus may have been viewed by Roman officials. We also have accounts from Jewish leaders, such as the high priest Gamaliel, who was a respected figure in 1st century Judaism and the teacher of the Apostle Paul. Gamaliel's writings provide an interesting perspective, as he eventually became a believer in Jesus after the resurrection. His descriptions of Jesus, preserved in documents found in the Library of Congress, add another layer to the complex mosaic of how Jesus was seen in his own time. One of the most detailed descriptions of Jesus comes from a copy of a letter by Roman consul Lentulus to Emperor Tiberius, found in a monastery along with other ancient documents. This letter, dated to the 12th year of Emperor Tiberius' reign, offers a more complete picture of Jesus' appearance. Lentulus describes Jesus as Jesus' serious demeanor was always dignified, and his conversations were reserved, modest, and serious. Lentulus noted that this is why Jesus was rightly called by the prophet, fairer than the children of men. This description of Jesus aligns closely with traditional portraits of Christ that emerged in later centuries. Some scholars have attempted to combine this information with what is known about the Shroud of Turin, a relic that some believe to be the burial cloth of Jesus. The Shroud of Turin bears the faint image of a man who many believe to be Jesus, and some experts have used it to try to reconstruct what Jesus might have looked like. One such scholar, Professor Giovanni Cordelia, an expert on the shroud, used his medical knowledge to analyze the image and described the man in the shroud as being remarkably beautiful, tall, about 5 feet 11 inches, and possessing a perfectly proportioned and graceful physique. Despite the damage to the cloth, Cordelia noted that the man's face appeared soft and gentle, with a long, broad forehead, a straight nose that curved slightly downward, and pronounced cheeks. Anthropometric studies conducted on the shroud suggest that Jesus was in excellent physical shape, likely more so than the average man of his time. Based on the size of his skull and other physical measurements, some researchers have hypothesized that Jesus may have had a larger-than-average brain, which could indicate a high level of intelligence. The question of Jesus' appearance has also been addressed by early Christian writers, known as the Church Fathers. Figures such as Justin Martyr and Origen, writing in the 2nd century, often referred to biblical passages such as Isaiah 53 to argue that Jesus' appearance was humble and unremarkable. Justin Martyr, in particular, emphasized that Jesus had no form, glory, or beauty that would attract people to him, and that his appearance was lowly in comparison to other men. However, other early Christian writers pointed to Psalm 45, which describes the Messiah as the most handsome of men, suggesting that Jesus may have been physically attractive. This seeming contradiction in descriptions has led some to believe that Jesus' appearance may have been perceived differently by different people, depending on their spiritual perspective. Saint Augustine, one of the most influential early Christian theologians, suggested the people's perceptions of Jesus were shaped by their own expectations and spiritual experiences. He wrote, "The Lord's physical face is pictured in many different ways by countless people, but no matter what he looked like, it's not important for our faith or salvation. What matters is that we think of him as a man." Augustine's reflection highlights the idea that Jesus' physical appearance was secondary to his spiritual significance. In the 4th century, another prominent Christian figure, Bishop Cyril of Jerusalem, added to this idea by stating that Jesus appeared in different forms to different people based on their needs. Cyril wrote, "The Savior appears in different forms to each person based on their needs. To those without joy, he is a vine. To those seeking to enter, he is a door. To those in trouble, he is a helper." This perspective suggests that Jesus' appearance was flexible, changing according to the spiritual condition of those who encountered him. Interestingly, early depictions of Jesus in Christian art were varied and often did not adhere to a specific racial or ethnic standard. For example, some of the earliest known images of Jesus come from the Roman catacombs, where he is shown as a youthful, clean-shaven figure resembling the god Apollo, the deity associated with the sun and light. These images reflect the influence of Roman culture on early Christian iconography. Over time, however, as Christianity spread and became more institutionalized, depictions of Jesus began to reflect the local cultures and artistic traditions of the regions where it took root. In the Byzantine Empire, for example, Jesus was often depicted with darker skin and features that more closely resembled those of Middle Eastern peoples. These images were heavily influenced by the artistic styles of the time, including the emphasis on symbolism and the use of gold leaf to convey divinity. In medieval Europe, artists often depicted Jesus with pale skin, light hair, and blue eyes, reflecting the racial characteristics of the people who created these images. This trend continued into the Renaissance and beyond, with famous artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo contributing to the creation of the Europeanized image of Jesus that would dominate Western art for centuries. In modern times, efforts have been made to create more historically accurate depictions of Jesus, reflecting the understanding that he was a Middle Eastern Jew living in the 1st century. Researchers have used various techniques, including forensic anthropology and analysis of ancient skeletal remains, to try to reconstruct what Jesus might have looked like. These reconstructions typically show Jesus as having dark skin, dark hair, and Middle Eastern features, in contrast to the Europeanized images that have been so prevalent in Western culture. One such reconstruction was created by a team of British scientists, led by forensic anthropologist Richard Neve, in collaboration with Israeli archaeologists. Neve's team used computerized tomography, CT scans of 1st century Jewish skulls to create a model of what Jesus may have looked like. The result was a dark-skinned man with a broad nose, short, curly hair, and a full beard, quite different from the typical Western image of Jesus. While this reconstruction is based on scientific evidence, it remains speculative, as no definitive physical description of Jesus exists. Nevertheless, it provides an alternative to the traditional Western image and aligns more closely with what historians and anthropologists believe about the physical characteristics of people living in 1st century Judea. In recent years, scholars and religious leaders have called for greater recognition of the diversity of depictions of Jesus, acknowledging that the traditional Western image is just one of many ways to imagine him. Some have argued that the emphasis on a white, European-looking Jesus has contributed to the marginalization of non-Western cultures and the erasure of Jesus' Middle Eastern identity. In response to these concerns, artists from diverse backgrounds have begun to create new representations of Jesus that reflect their own cultural identities. For example, African, Asian, and indigenous artists have depicted Jesus with features that resonate with their communities, offering a more inclusive vision of Christ that transcends racial and ethnic boundaries. Ultimately, the question of what Jesus looked like may never be definitively answered, and perhaps that is fitting. As St. Augustine suggested, the true significance of Jesus lies not in his physical appearance, but in the spiritual impact he has had on the world. Whether he is depicted as a pale-skinned European or a dark-skinned Middle Easterner, what matters most is the message of love, compassion, and redemption that he embodies. In the end, the search for the true image of Jesus is a reflection of our own desire to connect with the divine in a way that feels personal and meaningful. And while artistic depictions of Jesus will continue to evolve, the essence of his life and teachings will remain timeless, offering hope and inspiration to people of all cultures and backgrounds.